Hello everyone, welcome to Cellopedia. This is Maxim. You watch this video, that most likely means that you play cello or you are interested in learning how to do that. That also means that you know what it takes to practice. For different people, practicing means a bit different thing. But I believe we all agree that in order to play well, we need to spend time practicing. However, very often we miss one very important thing. We need to know and think about preparation. What do you do before you actually spend time practicing? I talk at length about this with my students, and I believe that helped me to identify 7 most important things you need to remember before you start practicing. Let's tune, and by the way, we will talk a bit about the way to tune and get to work. The first thing to do before you start practicing, check your instrument. And it seems to be so obvious. Of course, I need to check my cello. But it happens so often that we forget about at least one of the important things. Let's check it together, step by step. Make sure that your strings are clean. It is not just for looks. Usually, even after one day of practicing, you will have excessive rosin stuck to your strings. And that will make it harder to start the bow stroke. The string will not respond as quickly as it can. You need to have a soft, fairly clean cloth and remove rosin before you practice and ideally after you do that. I'm going to clean my strings right now, but for very sensitive people, you might want to turn your volume a bit down because most likely you will not like sound you're going to hear. It will not work if you just gently touch strings. You will need to put a little bit extra force to remove rosin. As I told you, it's not going to sound nice. But now it's done, and it's a good idea to clean the cello, the belly of the cello, and the fingerboard to get rid of all the rosin flakes which might fall on your cello. If you forget cleaning this cello this way for one day, probably not a big deal, but a week or let alone a month will make a difference and it will be much harder to remove this rosin. Your strings are now clean, there is no excessive rosin on them. That means you need to put some extra rosin on your bow. And my advice to do it right before you start practicing. If you do it every day, you don't have to do it a lot. Just gently rub the bow against the cake and that will be enough. Don't worry, the rosin will spread along the hair, and if there is a bit too much of rosin, don't worry, once you start playing, the excess of the rosin will quickly fall down. Now you are ready to start tuning your cello. And yes, you have to tune your cello every time before you play it. And very often you have to do it several times during a long practice session. We need to check an A with a tuner. Most of people tune it with A 440. Of course, the cello A is 1 octave lower than that, so it will be 220. But if you set your digital tuner to 440, that will definitely be exactly what you need. And after that, if you have some experience playing cello, I would suggest you to try to tune listening the combination of the next string with the string you already tuned. If you play string by string, it might sound just fine, but once you play them together, it might not actually sound as perfect as it could be. And tuning with a digital tuner might not help. Actual tuning is a bit more complicated than that. So, without making it too difficult, if it is too hard for you for now to hear the difference, use digital tuner to tune every string. But always give yourself a chance and tune the strings without tuner. And little by little, you will learn what it means when your strings are tuned perfectly well according to how you hear it. There is such a beauty when you hear two strings tuned perfectly well. Now, let's talk about our next step. You need to think about practice schedule. And it's not just about how much time you have to practice, but how you are going to use that time. First of all, it helps a lot, if possible, if you have regular time scheduled to practice. I know with your life schedule, it's just impossible even to think about that. But you might still try to think how you can adjust your schedule. Because practicing at the same time has several benefits. You don't have to think about each practicing session. Should I practice or not? Do I feel energetic enough or not? It will become your habit. On top of that, the earlier practicing time proved to be the most beneficial. Of course, you think it's crazy. In the morning, it's hard to even make a cup of coffee. But whatever you can make in the morning, whatever you can achieve, usually stays much longer. On top of that, you know your worst case scenario. That means you will make all mistakes in the morning. And rather than trying to hide them, try to think, oh, I will feel better closer to the evening, more inspired, I will definitely be warmed up, so I will not make those mistakes. This might not serve you well, because you should be the person who is perfectly aware of all mistakes you can make. And testing your skill in the morning usually proves to be the best, the hardest way to approach it. What is hard in the morning for most of us will be much easier during the second part of the day, when most likely you will want to show your skill to someone else. How much time to practice? There is no one answer to that. It depends on your age, it depends on your schedule, and most importantly, it depends on your goals. When I was preparing for different competitions, I practiced all the time I had available. That means I practiced 4, 5, 6 hours per day. But it doesn't have to be this way. Actually, it might even be harmful for a lot of cellists, because you have to be very careful with your hands, and once you overextend your ability to practice, you might even damage your muscles or joints. So we need to be very careful about that. On the other hand, 5 minutes of practicing per day most likely will not get you far. For most of the cellists who are not dreaming to become professional, practicing from half an hour to hour per day will work the best. We all want to play all of our favorite music, But no matter how much you are excited about your current project, make sure that you allocate at least 10 minutes of your practicing time for exercises, scales, arpeggios, and perhaps some of the etudes. Of course, 10 minutes might not be enough for everything on this list, so if you're relatively short on time, then you might want to play scales one day and etudes another day to prepare yourself to the main part of your work. It is a good idea to have all printed music right in front of you on your music stand. Once you see all etudes and scales printed out and set right in front of you, it's much harder to forget to work on them. And don't forget about this magic tool, a pencil. You must have it on your music stand. I haven't met any decent musician who wouldn't work with a pencil. That means that you have to mark all of your ideas in music. Of course, it doesn't mean that you have to write a story in your music, but you might be able to add extra fingerings. You might be able sometimes to circle the stubborn spot you're working on, so to draw all your attention to that spot. You might want to highlight dynamics, and perhaps sometimes to write a short note, which will help you to keep track of the progress and set your goals for your future practice session. Make sure that your hands are warm. Right before you start playing, make sure that you do basic exercises, rub your hands against each other, and when you start playing, start with something easy. And you will see that few minutes into practice session, you will feel that your fingers, your hands are ready to play. It is extremely helpful to set goals for each practice session. It doesn't have to be anything big. Not to memorize entire concerto after 1 hour of work. But it has to be something like playing through the certain spot without making mistakes. And you might need to warm up before that. You might need to play it measure by measure, but then you need to test your ability to do that. And if you are not able to achieve your goal, that doesn't mean that you failed. That means you are in the process of achieving your goal and you need few more attempts to do it. Your possible goals might be to be able to play at a certain tempo with a metronome. You might want to memorize a certain spot, say half a page or page of the text. Or you might set a goal to play through the piece without feeling that your shoulder or your fingers are sore. Whichever goal you can think of is a good goal to have. And in my experience, all of those goals and many more are possible to achieve once you start thinking about them and including them in your practice session plan every time. Practicing, trying to achieve all those goals requires a lot of concentration. You don't want to be distracted. Ideally, your practice room has to be quiet, shielded from all distractions. But all of those distractions might not only come from outside, but they might bug you right here. Your phone is usually the worst enemy. If it's possible, turn it on a silent mode and put away. You need those minutes of uninterrupted time. Every time you hear a notification that you got an email or text, your concentration is gone. And it takes a lot of time to concentrate after that. And once you achieve that, there is another email you need to check. It is hard to break this habit, but it is possible. There is actually an amazing book by Newport, which called Deep Work. If you haven't read it, I would highly recommend you to do that. To make it easier for you to find it, I put a link in the description of this video. I would strongly suggest you to get a tuner and metronome of old style, something like this. Because once you have it as a separate device, not on your phone, that means that you don't even have to think about your phone, and all of your efforts are dedicated to practicing. If you are still here, that means you might be interested in exploring my cello courses. There are several courses to choose from, and if you like some of them, you might even get a special discount if you use that link in the description. And now, the last but crucially important thing. We often hear an advice that you need to listen to the piece you are going to learn. And there is a lot of wisdom in it. However, working for many years with my students, I've noticed that for some of the students, listening a lot to the music before they start playing it limits their creativity. Instead of artists, they become copyists. Instead of creating their own interpretation, they just copy what they hear. Actually, that was one of the reasons why I started Cellopedia channel, because my students would come to me and make terrible mistakes right from the beginning. And I had hard time correcting those mistakes until I asked, why you even making them? Don't you know how to count or how to make sound? And they would tell me, well, I spent time preparing. I listened to that or another video, which turned out to be of poor quality. And I learned that the most effective way to work with recordings is first to try to do it on your own. You just have printed music and you make a fair attempt to learn it. You spend 1 or 2 practice sessions just playing using what you see in front of you. And after you made a few decisions how to count, about tempo, about dynamics and style overall, then you might want to check with recordings. And of course it applies to listening to my recordings too. I hope you will make a fair effort to figure out how you're going to play and then check with my recordings and see what you can do to make your playing better. And actually, ultimately, you can play better than I do. And once you achieve that, it's our success. I hope you learned something new, or at least I helped you to rethink the way you're going to prepare to your practice sessions. Keep playing cello and come back to Cellopedia.